I'll just walk through a few examples of where we've funded installations of rooftop solar in a couple of different scenarios, just to give you an idea of different models we've employed. But before I get to that, I'll just give you an idea of who we are and what we do. So we are an asset management business. We primarily focus on other financial assets, so equities and fixed income. Although we are, I think, the second largest property investor in Europe, that equates to about 6 or 7% of our total assets under management. So it's kind of quite a big business, but from an Aberdeen perspective, it's relatively small. We have about, as you said, 20.9 billion property assets under management globally, which is about 2,000 individual properties. And that is all sorts of different property types, whether it's offices, retail, industrial, residential, and again, multi-let, single-let. So it's kind of the whole array of different property types we have under our management. From a UK perspective, I think that's about 800 properties, and I think it was about 4,000 individual tenancies. So it's quite a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and I'll try and explain how we've done something in terms of solar. Just to give you a bit of context, these are our kind of four principles, and this is why we're looking at solar. So this applies to everything that we do from a property investment perspective. We have 4 key principles. First one is really looking to manage our risks and resources. Second one is obviously to comply with government regulations and the like. Third one is to be seen as an industry leader. And finally, work in partnership, which from a solar perspective is quite important to us. We're making sure we're working with our occupiers. They're a key stakeholder of ours, so we need to make sure we work with them. And solar quite neatly also falls into the first and second category as well. Potentially even in the third category as well, you could say. So a way of managing our risks and resources. In a little bit more detail, from a risk and resource management, we have a wider energy strategy which we've set out to 2020 with long-term reduction targets. There are 4 aspects of that. Again, from this perspective, in terms of what you're interested in, the key part is whilst we're looking to reduce our energy spend and improve the efficiency of our assets, we're also looking to develop alternative energy supplies and look at low carbon initiatives. The fourth one is actually, again, relevant in terms of it's working with our occupiers and helping them to improve the efficiency of their energy spend. Obviously, whilst we have a multi-million-pound energy spend, that's actually a fraction of what goes through the assets, because the vast majority of the energy is actually consumed by the tenant, and they all have their own direct supply, certainly for the industrial and retail warehouses. Sorry, Syzygy, your logo hasn't come out very well. But just to give you an idea of what we did, so last year, the year before, we did a whole portfolio review across all the UK assets, and we employed Syzygy, whose logo you can't see, to help us with that. So that equated to about 870,000 square metres of roof space that they looked at for us. And of all those, I think there was probably about, if John McDonald Brown was here, he'd be able to tell me the numbers, but I think it's about 50 or 60% of that was actually potentially feasible, and in theory could generate enough to power 2,000 homes annually. What we're doing at the moment is working through that and identifying where we can install solar. It's a moving feast. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes we're looking to sell the asset, so it might not make sense from that perspective. But that's kind of the bigger piece, the whole pie, as it were. What I wanted to do was take you through a couple of industrial examples that we've funded, and then one office, because they have slightly different characteristics. So this is one of the ones we did back in 2011. It was quite an earlier one. So as you can see, we got a very high fit, so 32.9 pence, which is significantly different than you might get now. Interestingly, the installation was around about £267,000, which equated to 432 panels. As you can see from the picture, it's actually only a few. It hardly covers the roof at all, and I think that's something that I'll touch on a little bit later. But with the reduction in the subsidies and potentially the removal of the subsidies, we might avoid that situation when you've got half a roof untouched, because the fits were effectively constraining what we might install to make sure we optimise the tariff. What we've done, we funded the installation of the panels. We agreed a power purchase agreement with the tenants, who was Royal Mail in this instance, and we agreed a price. At the time, it was 5 pence per kilowatt hour, linked to the retail price index, and that's given us a predicted 13.2 return after operating costs. I say predicted, actually, we have slightly bettered that since then. So that's the first one. It's a fairly straightforward situation. The only thing that was quite difficult was actually the legal situation and trying to agree the power purchase agreement with Royal Mail. There was at the time not a lot of case history, if you like, in terms of how to actually do this and the mechanics of it. And I think we learned quite a lot going through that process in terms of what not to do. Another one which was installed last year, another industrial asset. Again, we funded the installation. As you can see, the funding cost virtually the same number, 268k. But you can see the number of panels we actually installed for that. So we've installed 1,000 panels this time for virtually the same number, which just shows the change in the cost of the panels over time. Fit rate significantly different, 9.5 pence. But if you actually then drop down and look at the return, yeah, it's 3% less, but actually a 10% return is still pretty good, and we're pretty comfortable with that. And actually, when you translate that to actual money, it's hardly even noticeable, to be honest. You're talking a difference between 28k and 35k per year, so it's not a big number. So it still definitely works for us. The other interesting aspect, as you can see, we've actually again agreed a power purchase agreement with the occupier, who is Biffa Waste in this instance. And we've agreed 7.5 pence per kilowatt hour linked. So as you can see, there are moving fees, but since between 2011 and 2015, you can see where cost of panels has come down, fit has equally come down, but actually we're also managing to charge a little bit more. And I suspect going forward, we may well be able to do that a bit more going in the future. Just an observation, I've kind of touched on it already, but just the observation in terms of, obviously in 2011 you had the high fit, but obviously the higher cost of the panels, whereas in 2015 it was lower fit, lower costs, and more than double the number of panels we've actually installed. And we've actually, as I said, higher recharge to the tenants. So from a return on investment perspective, as I said, it's very similar. So although there has been quite a bit of doom and gloom in terms of fits dropping and obviously continuing to drop, the other things have changed, which still makes it a commercially viable investment, at least from our perspective anyway. Slightly different situation here. This is an office. Well, it's actually two offices. I've only got one in the photo, but it's the one next to it as well. They're both two large office developments in central London. There was a requirement to install solar PV and BREEAM, so we got BREEAM Excellent for both of them. The relatively small systems, as you can imagine, that's constrained by the floor area of the roof area is the word I'm looking for, and the plants, etc. on the site. So we haven't got a huge amount. What we've actually done in the past in similar situations is pretty much nothing. We've installed the panels, and then we just left it, and the power was just going straight into the service charge, into the building. We weren't getting any benefit from it. What we've done in this instance is registered it, and as you can see again, the number is dropped again. But we're actually selling it back to the service charge at 8 pence per kilowatt hour, which is still less than we'd be able to get on the open market. So the service charge is less than it would be. So there's a benefit to the occupiers, and that income is equivalent to about 10k per annum additional income stream for each building, which if we hadn't done this, in fact, which is what we did on the other buildings, we wouldn't have had. So it's money that we've invested in the panels. We've achieved the BREEAM, so we might as well connect it and get it registered. As I said, we've reduced the service charge due to the lower energy costs. We've actually ensured that we fully utilise the features which are installed in the BREEAM, which it doesn't always happen. And interestingly, the first ones we did were FRI buildings. That, as I said, in 2011 was the first one, which was probably a much more complicated situation to do. This was very easy. There's no additional contracts, no legal contracts we had to get into in terms of negotiating with the occupiers. We just basically put the panels on the roof and then charge it back to the service charge. And we've done similar on shopping centres, and as I said, from a contract perspective, this is far simpler and definitely something we intend to do going forward. In terms of what we're looking to do, my formatting's gone a bit strange there. Going forward, we are definitely intending to continue to fund and install solar across our portfolio. With the removal of, well, I say removal, the reduction, probable removal of the subsidy, to an extent, it's just providing a little bit more flexibility for us. We can actually get to installation quicker because there's less hurdles in terms of some of the registration. We're not being constrained, as I touched on earlier, in terms of trying to manage the fit bands, the output to the fit bands, so we can install more panels and maximise returns that way. And we've got a number of properties where we're looking at where we can literally, cover the roof, assuming it's structurally sound, with panels, which we wouldn't have dreamed of doing before, because we would have always been driven by trying to maximise the fits. So, and in fact, those instances, actually, we're not even going to register for fits, in part because we can't, because it's on a private network. But it's interesting how the removal has actually made it slightly more flexible. I think going forward, we still foresee that we'll be able to get a 5%, potentially 7% return. It's not unrealistic. With the continuing reduction of panel costs, the cost of panels reducing, then that just makes it even more viable. And what happens with the minimum import price and Brexit and all the rest of it might make it even more viable. I suspect you probably touched on that this morning. But for us, it's not really just about the return. That's great. That obviously makes it easier for me when I'm talking to the asset managers. But there are a whole raft of co-benefits. Engaging with the tenants and making sure that they're happy and they're wanting to sign up for longer term leases and renew leases is a very key one for us. Reducing the carbon emissions, either our carbon emissions or the tenant carbon emissions, is also key. And coming back to the first couple of slides I gave, it's one of our key principles and commitments. And then reputationally, which you can't read, it is there. It helps. It helps us as a PLC. It helps us as a fund manager, as an investment manager, to be doing this and to be seen to be doing something. So there are a number of additional drivers, and as I said, I think we'll continue to fund installations across the portfolio. I think that was fairly rapid, but that was me done. I don't know if we'll do questions now or later.
We'll do questions later.
Okay,
Thank you, Dan.